collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll discuss water sustainability, and it doesn't look very good for Cyprus.
Estimates vary between about 5 to 8% decrease in precipitation for the island.
The Cyprus Computer Society says we need to get more people online.
We have broadband coverage all over Cyprus, but still about 50% of the population have not used the internet.
And a Unity Fest bringing young people together on both sides of the Cyprus divide.
We are Cypriot. This is our common identity. We have a common culture. We are not different people. I mean, we are very close to each other.
The Eastern Mediterranean is becoming measurably hotter and drier, and many experts predict that increasing water scarcity will exacerbate conflict and political unrest throughout the region. Recently in Nicosia, the Prio-Cyprus Centre launched a report that has been published jointly with the London School of Economics entitled Water Technology and Sustainability in North Cyprus. Subtitle: Climate Change and the Turkey-North Cyprus Water Pipeline. The authors are Rebecca Bryant and Michael Mason, and they join us now. Michael, you're a geographer, and I know you've worked in the West Bank and Gaza and other areas around here. But because Cyprus is an island, I assume that the problems we face are perhaps slightly different from other areas of the Levant.
Yes. My interest in Cyprus came from my colleague here, Rebecca Bryant, who used to work at London School of Economics and is a long-standing researcher and expert in Cyprus, invited me to be involved in a project looking at the potential climate vulnerability of Cyprus in the context, in my case, of the Eastern Mediterranean. Cyprus, yes, as an island, has particular features, hydrological features which make some of the water issues unique to the island. But I think a good starting point is we think generally about the climate change projections for the Eastern Mediterranean, and there is some uncertainty about the particular sort of impacts in the future, but generally scientists project that the Eastern Mediterranean, and Cyprus in particular, will be subject to warming for the rest of this century, in the context in which what's technically called a business as usual scenario, in which the current international climate change regulation, which takes place on the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, will not reverse immediately what's happening. So in the best case scenario, we're thinking perhaps in terms of turning things around by the end of this century, but at least as things stand, there will be a projected warming. The projected warming is up to about 4 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, compared to sort of an average of the last quarter of the 20th century. There's also projected impact in terms of precipitation, which is, for Cyprus, again, estimates vary between about 5 to 8% decrease in precipitation for the island. This must be set against the fact that already we know that precipitation in Cyprus has decreased in 17% from the last quarter of the 20th century. So Cyprus's mean annual rainfall used to be about 500 millimetres a year. That was a running average from about 1960 to 2000. The average going from the end of the last century to about 2010 is now 457 millimetres.
Well, we all know about that here because we all know about the water cuts we used to have when water was rationed. And I'm interested to know, actually, before we get on to what came out of your sort of conference last week, about the fact that I think Cyprus has more dams on the island than pretty well anywhere else, certainly in Europe and probably in the world. And I'm wondering how that impacts. It was maybe a short-sighted view to stop up all that water, and now it just evaporates in the summer as it collects in the dams.
The attraction is it's a relatively simple engineering fix to allow you to store water. One of the issues in Ireland, of course, has been that the dam building, which has happened mostly in the Republic, I think we have about 270 dams in the south, okay, that's taken place without regard to the impacts on the north. So there are cross-territory watercourses, if you like, between and aquifers between the Republic and the north of Cyprus. It's an easy engineering fix. It's not just Cyprus that this is a favoured option, but one of it gives over, I think, to kind of this idea of water availability when you see these reservoirs of water. And in Cyprus in particular, it led to a situation back in 2003, 4, 5, there was higher than average rainfall, and some of the dams are overflowing. And I think people on the island, as far as I can see, got into this sort of idea that was almost water abundance. And unfortunately, much of the development that's taken place since has been on the basis of this, what I would call fictitious baseline. It was a moment above the historical average in terms of water availability.
But they must also have had an impact, for example, on the coastal areas where that water would have flowed out.
Yes, yeah. So there's an impact in terms of the through flow. So this has an impact in terms of what you can do, for example, in terms of agriculture and access to water below and above dam.
Rebecca, let's come to you. Tell us about this conference and this report. And you were looking particularly at how water issues, I think, could be used possibly as a joint thing for the north and the south of Cyprus, because let's face it, like so many other things, there are no national boundaries to the environment, are there?
Exactly. And the environment, like so many other issues, is one that has been unfortunately held hostage to the Cyprus problem. So it's an issue that has not been addressed as a bi-communal issue or as an island-wide issue, precisely because people are waiting for something to happen with the Cyprus problem, and so it's been held hostage to that. But of course, despite the barriers above ground, the island is an entirety in its environmental structure, and so that has to be addressed in a bilateral way. And yes, one of the aims of the research itself was to think about how problems of divided governance are affecting the capacity to plan for climate change. And we specifically focused on the north, partly because there's much more research on this in the south, and the availability of research is much higher. In other words, there's more transparency than in the north. So we focused on this there, but the aim was largely to get information out in the hopes that there will be more bi-communal activism on this issue, especially in civil society.
Now, I know that you looked at the fact that Turkey, I think last year or the year before, started to pipe water to the north of Cyprus. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot in our local press about the problems when that first arrived and where it was going to go to and so on and so forth. Is that a solution, though, to pipe water from somewhere else? Is it more environmentally friendly, I presume so, than, for example, desalination, which we've tried in the south with mixed success, I could say?
On whether it's more environmentally friendly, I'll have to let Michael speak. But in terms of the problems initially, I'm an anthropologist, and so my contribution to this project had to do more with looking at the governance and politics around the pipeline and water management in the north.
And what were your conclusions on that?
Well, the conclusions were fairly negative ones. Well, in terms of water governance, there's a very decentralized system that is a remnant of the British period in the island. And that decentralized system, unfortunately, especially in terms of climate change planning, has meant that there is a lack of availability of data, there is a lack of planning, there is a lack of implementation. So one of our conclusions was precisely that there needs to be centralized water governance, particularly by an independent water board. Now, that presents certain problems in terms of how to negotiate that with the South, right? In other words, how could that be created bilaterally? Is that possible? It may not be possible. However, it may be possible as an independent body if it were not considered to be part of the so-called state in the North, but rather something that was part of the other structures, such as the Chamber of Commerce, that are accepted in the South.
So if I get this right, you're suggesting that the solution for the water problem, island-wide, could be, because it's highly unlikely, I think, that we'll have one central pan-Cyprian overview body, that you could have a privatised unit in the north and the same in the south, and a bit like the two Nicosia municipalities used to, they could cooperate to solve the water problem on both sides.
Well, I wouldn't say that we're making that specific suggestion, though it's not a bad one, but rather that we're saying that the difficulties regarding environmental management in the island should not be insurmountable because of the division. In fact, they very much, we're in a desperate need of some sort of bilateral cooperation between the two sides. What you've just suggested would be one way of handling that. Another possibility would be, if not a private body, at least a body that could be considered to be part of civil society, in other words, outside of the so-called state. So not something that could imply recognition, right? So since recognition by implication is the main obstacle to having that kind of necessary cooperation.
So can I ask each of you what you see as solutions to this problem, if there are any, and what the impact might be a few years down the line if these issues are not addressed?
Just to track back about the issue on the pipeline, is the transportation of fresh water from Turkey something which is environmentally sound? It's possible for countries to transfer water, okay? I think by itself, we need to understand the context in which the source of the water is coming from to think about sustainability. The 75 million cubic meters being pumped per year is coming from a river in Turkey, the Anamur River, which has an annual flow of 750 million cubic meters a year.
So that's a drop in the ocean.
It's 10%. However, and that agreement is for up to 50 years between the Turkish government and the administration in the north. One of the things we looked at is what might be the impact on the basin in Turkey from which this water is coming from, climate change impact. There are projections that it will dry, not to the extent that it would affect that 10%. So when we presented this report, some people were saying, well, there's no problem because it's only 10%, we can get more if we want. Well, Turkey's only saying 10% at the moment. There's no prospect necessarily that that would increase. And there might be other demands on that water. So I think it's a mistake to think that the North could just expect more water from that source. And I think the general issue about sustainability is it must be in the context of the water being used efficiently when it's received.
Well, I was going to come to that, because the one problem that we do seem to have, I know we have it in the south and I've heard that it's similar in the north, is a fairly cavalier attitude to how water is used.
Exactly.
And that surely has to change because we need to cut consumption as drastically as we can to make it last as long as possible, don't we?
Yeah. Exactly. In fact, that was one of the initial motivations that I had for starting this research, because I could see that this water coming was not going to produce some kind of change of habit. In fact, if it produced a change of habit, it was going to produce a negative change of habit in the sense that people would say, the water problem is solved, now we can use all the water we want, rather than seeing this as an investment for the future, something that should be utilized to try to plan for climate change and potentially produce more diverse ways of gaining and also using the water. So yes, that is a very big concern. And
what was the reaction of the audience to the idea that they need to cut down on their use of water?
Well, the audience itself, I think, was fairly predisposed to that idea. Many of them were involved in various ways in planning and management. So I don't think that the audience itself looked at that idea negatively. Though some people, I think, were a bit surprised that that was a consideration, precisely because of this 10% issue, that it's only 10% of the water from the river, and so why should we bother? Because they can always just increase the flow. Yeah. So unfortunately, there are people who have suggested, for example, increasing the production of various kinds of water-intensive crops, which is already a huge problem in the north. That, for example, we use in the presentation the example of artichokes, which are one of the most water-intensive vegetables, and many people have suggested that now that this water is here, this can be a wonderful opportunity for us to export artichokes.
All right, sounds like things in the north are much as they are in the south, because about 15 years ago I remember talking to a water expert who said, don't know why you're growing citrus and watermelons, you should be growing cut flowers. And that was all to do with the amount of water being used by the farming industries. And in effect, he said, you don't have water, but you're exporting it. So these are obviously issues on both sides of the divide. Did you get a feeling of hope that something could be done bi-communally to address the issue for the whole of Cyprus?
Well, I know that there is a desire to do this, but I'm not sure yet that there is sufficient drive. And again, I think that does have partly to do with everyone waiting at the moment to see whether the negotiations will collapse or continue, and so not knowing exactly where to go from here. If they do collapse, I think that there's going to need to be more civil society organization around these issues.
So, this report I know is online because it was all done by PRIO, the Peace Research Institute of Oslo. Where can people find out more and perhaps read the report to see all the issues, because we didn't have time to cover everything?
Well, this was actually a joint publication of the LSE and PRIO, I should say, to give LSE credit, but the report is available at the PRIO website, which is www.prio.no.
We've been talking to Michael Mason and Rebecca Bryant, who gave a talk on their report on water technology and sustainability in North Cyprus, looking particularly at climate change and the Turkey to North Cyprus water pipeline.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
You may remember on the programme a couple of weeks ago we spoke to Panikos Masouras, who's the board secretary of the Cyprus Computer Society. Then we were talking about the upcoming Robotex exhibition and competition. But I asked Panikos to join me again on the programme because I wanted to find out more about the Cyprus Computer Society. It's been part of our life here on the island for quite some time, but that's about all I know about it. So Panikos, when was it formed and who were its members?
Oh boy, it was formed 33 years ago exactly, 1984, by the pioneers of the time, that recent graduates of the time that came from the United States with their BSc degrees. And the members are individuals, graduates of universities from all over the world holding degrees, as we used to say, in computer science. Now things, of course, have changed, and degrees like information technology, ICT, electronics and electronic engineers, or any other related field, internet studies, multimedia, all these are part of the profiles of our members.
Why do they join the Cyprus Computer Society? What's in it for them? What do you offer them as members?
Okay, what we offer them as members? We offer them opportunities to discover themselves, to improve themselves through training and conferences and workshops, to network with other professionals, which is very important in our world, because sitting behind a computer is not the most social thing to do, as we all know. So we give them a chance to get out of the office, to go out in a bar and have a beer and chat with their colleagues and peers. All get them together in a cafe or even a conference in which they can socialize. And we have a number of events that we organize, conferences. We have the cybersecurity conference coming up next year. We have an education conference that we organize every 2 years. And we are trying to be close to the computer professional, or as we call them today, to the IT professionals.
Can I ask you, though, about the broader population? Because I would think the society is in a prime position to try and bring on board, not possibly as members, but to create an interest, particularly in the older generation of Cypriots, because the tech side of life has largely passed many of them by, hasn't it?
Indeed, there is a gap. There is a gap among generations in the way they parents and kids think, and there is a gap between what the old people know about technology and how they communicate with their young generation. So, as Cyprus Computer Society, we have a number of interesting activities, let's say, that they bring not parents together with kids, but let's say teacher with kids, in order for kids to educate their teachers, because there is a gap there as well, believe it or not. And maybe our next project will be to bring parents and kids together to learn how to communicate online, because what is happening now, kids are sitting in their room playing on the internet, parents are sitting in the living room watching TV, in two different worlds and there is no communication between them. So an interesting project will be to bring these two different kinds of people together, the kids and their parents, in order to exchange ideas, in order for kids to teach their parents how to communicate with them in the new era.
Well, and also, although, as we mentioned, I think the last time we chatted, this idea that the work we do with government ought to be able to be done online. There were moves afoot which seem to have stalled somewhat, but the time will come, I presume, when we're going to be told if you want to renew your driving licence, the only way to do it is online. And a lot of older people are not going to have the first idea what to do. They probably don't even own a computer.
That's how other countries have done it. They set a deadline until which everything should be done online. Paying your taxes, paying your social insurance, renewing your passport, renewing your license, your driving license, and so on. But yes, you are right. There are people in Cyprus that have never used a computer before. They don't have the skills, they don't have the knowledge. Their children may know.
But shouldn't we be reaching out to them and having, I don't know, government-run workshops or whatever, teaching the basics?
That's what I'm about to say, that we need to invest in improving the citizen skills. As Cyprus Computer Society, we have a program called Digital Citizen, or e-Citizen. And the idea there is to give people the chance to go on the computer, get online, do a transaction online, buy a CD or buy a piece of cloth through the internet in order to get out the worry and get out of the fear that people have when they are asked to do shopping online, for example. They say, first of all, if they know something, they say, I will not use my credit card. But if you know how to use your credit card online, then it's perfectly safe. Now, we had an incident about the WannaCry problem with cybersecurity, where cyber terrorists, let's say, invaded in different computers all over the world. Okay, these people are out there. We need to be aware of their existence. We need to learn how to protect ourselves. It's exactly the same as when driving a car. We need to know how we drive our computer. We need to drive our computer in the safest way possible. But we need to teach people the basics or raise awareness about the dangers of doing business online or working online.
So the courses that you were just talking about, they're open to everybody, are they? Do they cost? Because that's the other problem, is a lot of the people who are, let's say, at the back of the line for this sort of thing are the poorer people.
The poorer people. That's an issue. Okay. In earlier days, we were saying about the digital inclusion. Now we need to talk about the social aspect of the digital inclusion, okay? Because people are not only falling behind in terms of knowing things regarding computers and using the computer, but they are falling behind socially because they cannot socialize in the new technological world, let's say. So giving the people the basic skills in order to how to use the internet, how to communicate online, it will not be a cost for the state, for the country. It will be an investment for the future because it will upgrade the quality of life of the citizens, and
Okay,
that's
but
what we should aim at.
But at the moment, we don't have that from the government. You mentioned that the
We
Computer
don't.
Society does have it, and I presume you do charge.
Okay, let me clarify something. The government has been, in the recent years, focusing in upgrade the skills of the workforce. Okay, and due to the crisis, they have invested a lot of money in different training and retraining programs of the workforce, and they have done that in a very good way, to be honest. But as you very well said, they forgot all about the older people, all the people in the villages, all the people who are isolated, all the people who don't have access, and they don't have access because they don't have the skills. We have broadband coverage all over Cyprus, but still about 50% of the population have not used the internet. And these people are in the rural areas, these people are the farmers, these people are the workers, these people are the people who live in old houses. So we'll need to teach them, yes, and the government has to put training programs together. Now, what we do in terms of what I said before as our program in eCitizen is to bring in older people of any age to teach them the basic skills. Now, the Computer Society does not have the means to do this, so we cooperate with our members, we cooperate with a network of training centers all over Cyprus through what we call the ECDL program. I don't know if you know what the ECDL is. The ECDL is the European Computer Driving License. And please allow me to say here that the Ministry of Education, following the consultations with the Digital Champion of Cyprus, then decided to offer this ECDL program to the children of gymnasium in Cyprus. A similar program could be put together to teach our older people in Cyprus how to use the computers, how to use the internet, how to get online in order to discover the new world out there.
Okay, so that's something for the future, and I guess you'll be pushing for that because it will make a huge difference, not just to the older people, but to the younger people too.
Of course, and we hope with the cooperation of the Digital Champion under what we call the Digital Agenda and the Grand Coalition for Digital Jobs, we intend to propose such actions, such measures that will upgrade and upskill the level of our population, no matter of their age, no matter of their status, no matter of their race, in order to have an inclusive society that brings people together and does not exclude them from the benefits that the internet and the whole digital environment provides.
That is Panikos Masouras, Board Secretary of the Cyprus Computer Society, and you can find out more at www.ccs.org.cy. Next week there's a Unity Fest taking place in the buffer zone in Nicosia by the Libra Palace Hotel. It is the work of a lot of young people who've come together to give a message to the leaders as they meet in Switzerland for those all-important talks on reunification of Cyprus. Joining us from the United Cyprus Bicommunal Peace Initiative, we have Tagis Hadji Dimitriou and Shener Ichil. Let's start with you, if we may, Tagi. So tell us about the festival.
It's an initiative of the young people, and this is important. It's not limited to the people of the older generation having common experiences or memories from the past. The younger generation are creating a new kind of relations, and I can assume that this on a higher level of cultural relations, not only social relations, of cultural, scientific dialogue, and now in this case with music. And it's something has been neglected by the leaders. The leaders are discussing legal issues, economic issues, constitutional, international, but culture is missing. It's very important because through culture we can create the foundation of the future, the mutual respect, common efforts, friendship based on a strong base. The festival cannot solve the Cyprus problem, but can give a message that we are looking forward for a peaceful Cyprus, for a united Cyprus, for our young people, for our future. That division is catastrophe for the island.
Yeah, it is important that it's a grassroots movement, isn't it? And the young people who were present when it was launched earlier this week seem very enthusiastic indeed. Now, Doug has mentioned culture. There is a huge amount of shared culture, is there not, between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots?
I define myself as a Turkish-speaking Cypriot, and we are Cypriot. This is our common identity. We have a common culture. We are not different people. I mean, we are very close to each other. I read something yesterday on the newspaper that they make a scientific research on genes, and they found that Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot genes are dissimilar. This is we can say that we are Cypriot. This is our nation. We have to be proud of it. We respect each other. We respect our religion, language. This is something else, but we have common things we have to focus on. And this festival is creating an opportunity to use the music as an instrument, to invite the people from both sides to come together, to show their performance, to be together, to share something. Music is a piece, you know. I remember when I was a child, China and the United States had a problem many years since 1948. Then it started during the 70s with a table tennis tournament to get a contact. Sport is another factor that reapproach the people to have some common things. I mean, always the forces who are favor of the division of the island, always using the things that separate to us, but we have lots of common things, more than the division points that...
So more in common than
exactly.
what divides us. But the other thing that's very important, isn't it, is the future of these very young people. Because if we continue the way we are, is there a future for them in Cyprus? Are they leaving, for example, from northern Cyprus?
Youth is the future of Cyprus. I mean, youngsters are the future of Cyprus. We have to urge them, we have to help them, we have to assist them to come together. This is our main role. Our fathers, they suffer a lot, you know, our mothers, our parents, they suffer a lot, but it's time for the peace. And I'm very happy that the initiative comes from the youngsters of Cyprus to us. They demanded our assistance to help them to organize this festival. This is very, very important for us, and maybe first time in history actually. They organized many things in the past, but this is mass organization.
And they approached the Bicommunal Peace Initiative, who are co-sponsoring this along with the European Parliament office in Cyprus and the European Commission representation in Cyprus. So if you want to join in the fun, there are free buses from all the major towns, north and south. You can find the details on Facebook, and it will be, of course, in other areas of the press. That's a Bicommunal Unity Fest taking place by the Lidra Palace Hotel next week. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.